The Velker plains looked like the end of the world. 3 days had passed since the massive space battle, but the ground still smoked and burned. Pieces of destroyed starships stuck out of the blackened earth everywhere Lily looked. Some were as small as cars. Others were as big as buildings. They looked like gravestones in a cemetery, except these graves belonged to ships instead of people. The air smelled terrible. Burnt metal mixed with chemicals and other things Lily tried not to think about. Every breath made her throat hurt. The sky above had a weird orange color because of all the smoke and dust floating in the atmosphere. This wasn't her home planet, but it had been supposed to be safe. That's why the colony ships had stopped here. The Galactic Council had won their fight against the Scarth Swarm. That's what the emergency broadcast had said before the communications went dead. They'd won, but winning didn't mean they'd saved everyone. The Council forces had packed up and left, taking their survivors with them. They'd left behind the wreckage, the bodies, and apparently they'd left behind 8-year-old Lily Bennett too. Lily moved carefully through the debris field. Her blue colony jumpsuit, the one that had been so clean and new when she put it on 4 days ago, was now ripped in 3 places. Dark purple stains covered the fabric. That was Scarth blood or ichor, or whatever the insect-like aliens had instead of regular blood. Her brown hair hung in tangled knots around her face, and her hands were covered in cuts and bruises. She'd been on one of the evacuation convoys when everything went wrong. The Scarth had sent suicide drones, kamikaze ships that crashed into anything that moved. One had hit near her transport. The explosion had thrown her clear, and when she'd woken up, everyone was gone. The convoy had left without her, probably thinking she was dead. For 2 days, Lily had hidden inside the broken hull of a frigate that had crashed during the battle. The ship was split open like a cracked egg, but part of the crew quarters was still intact. She'd found emergency ration bars in a storage locker. They tasted like cardboard mixed with vitamins, but they kept her alive. She'd also found a water recycler that still worked, giving her something to drink even though it tasted like metal. But she couldn't stay in that hiding spot forever. The ration bars were almost gone. She needed to find help, find another survivor, find anything that might get her off this nightmare planet. That's when she saw it move. At first, Lily thought it was just another piece of wreckage shifting in the wind. But then it moved again and she realized this thing was alive. She froze in place, her heart suddenly pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The creature was massive. Bigger than anything Lily had ever seen up close. It had to be at least 50 meters from its head to the tip of its tail. Maybe longer. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered between deep crimson red and bright gold, even though they were covered in ash and dirt. The scales caught the orange light from the burning sky and seemed to glow. One of its wings spread out across the ground, the membrane torn and bones clearly broken. The other wing was tucked against its side, but even that one looked damaged. Blood, real red blood like humans, had pooled beneath its body. Lily had seen pictures and videos during the colony ship journey. Everyone had. The Galactic Council used dragons from the Draconis star system as their elite warriors. They were supposed to be unstoppable. They could fly through the vacuum of space without ships. They could breathe fire hot enough to melt through starship armor. One dragon could take on an entire battalion of enemy soldiers and win. They were living weapons. Perfect predators. Invincible. Except this one was dying. The dragon's massive head lifted slightly from the ground. It turned toward Lily and one enormous eye opened. The eye was golden, like molten metal, and easily as large as Lily's entire body. The pupil, a vertical black slit, focused directly on her with frightening intelligence. Lily should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around and hide. This creature, even wounded, could kill her without trying. One snap of those jaws, each tooth as long as her arm, and she'd be gone. But she didn't run. Because as that golden eye stared at her, Lily didn't see a monster. She didn't see a weapon or a predator. She saw something else entirely. She saw pain. She saw loneliness. She saw someone who'd been left behind just like her. The dragon wasn't trying to scare her. It wasn't hunting. It was doing something Lily understood completely. It was asking for help. Lily took one small step forward. Her legs shook, but she forced them to move. Then another step. And another. She walked across the scorched ground, past twisted metal and broken equipment, until she stood right in front of the greatest predator in the known galaxy. She was just a child. 8 years old. Small even for her age. She had no weapons, no special powers, no way to really help a creature this size. But she had something else. Something her mom had always said made humans special, even in a galaxy full of stronger, smarter, more advanced species. She had compassion. And sometimes that was enough. The dragon told her his name was Thornax, though the sound that came from his throat was more like distant thunder mixed with grinding rocks. When Lily tried to repeat it, she could only manage Thorn, and the dragon's massive eye seemed to soften slightly, like maybe he understood. He spoke directly into her mind, which felt strange at first. Not painful, just weird, like having thoughts that weren't hers. His voice was deep and old, carrying the weight of centuries. Each word came with great effort. His breathing was labored and painful, like every breath hurt. Through gasps and long pauses, Thorn explained what had happened during the battle. He'd been flying cover for the evacuation convoys when the Scarith launched their final attack. Those insect creatures had sent suicide drones screaming toward the transport ships. The transports were packed with refugees, mostly human colonists and their families. Thousands of people. The ships had no real weapons, no shield strong enough to stop what was coming. Thorn had done what he was trained to do since birth. He'd thrown himself between the drones and those defenseless ships. His armored body became a shield for people he didn't know. Plasma lances, weapons designed to punch through starship hulls, had torn through his scales. He'd taken 7 direct hits. Any one of them would have killed most creatures instantly. But he'd held his position long enough. Long enough for the transports to activate their jump drives and escape. Long enough for Lily's convoy to get away to safety. Well, most of it anyway. Then he'd fallen from the sky and crashed here on the Velker plains. His body's natural healing had tried to kick in, but the damage was too severe. The wounds were too deep, too many. And his people, the other dragons from the Draconis worlds, had already moved to the next battle. That was their way, he explained. The wounded either healed themselves quickly or they died. Dragons didn't wait around. They didn't waste time on those who couldn't keep fighting. Thorn had accepted this. He'd made peace with dying alone on this burnt world. But Lily wasn't a dragon. And she wasn't going to leave. She looked at this massive creature who'd saved her life, who'd saved everyone on her transport, and she made a simple decision. He wasn't going to die alone. Not if she could help it. The first thing Lily did was search through the battlefield wreckage for medical supplies. She knew military ships always carried emergency kits. She found one in a crashed fighter jet, the cockpit crushed but the storage compartment still intact. Then she found another in what looked like a supply shuttle that had been cut in half by weapons fire. The kits were designed for humans, not dragons obviously, but medicine was medicine, right? Lily hoped the basic stuff would work. The biofoam turned out to be the most useful thing in the kits. It was designed to seal wounds and stop bleeding automatically. The instructions said to apply it to injuries and let it expand. Lily had to use 3 entire containers, the big ones meant for emergency field hospitals, just to cover the worst of Thorn's injuries. She climbed up on his side using his scales like ladder rungs. Her small hands worked the foam applicators, spreading the white expanding substance over gashes that were deeper than she was tall. Some of the wounds were so big she could have crawled inside them. The thought made her stomach turn, so she focused on the work instead. The foam expanded and hardened, creating a seal over each injury. It probably wasn't perfect dragon medicine, but it was better than letting him bleed out. Water became the next challenge. Thorn had managed to tell her, between waves of pain, that dragons needed massive amounts of water. Their internal fire systems, the biological furnaces that let them breathe plasma and survive in space, required constant hydration. Without water, that fire would go out. And if that happened, he'd die within hours. Lily searched until she found a crashed tanker half buried in the dirt. It had been carrying water for the colony's agriculture systems. Most of the water had leaked out during the crash, leaving dark mud everywhere, but there were still a few thousand gallons trapped in the lower tanks. The problem was getting that water to Thorn. He couldn't move to the tanker, and she couldn't exactly carry water in her hands. Lily spent 6 hours figuring out a solution. She had no real engineering training, just some basic maintenance classes they'd made all the colony kids take on the ship. But she was good at solving puzzles, and this was just a really big, really important puzzle. She found the tanker's emergency pump system and got it working. Then she started collecting hoses from different wrecks, connecting them together like a giant chain. She used clamps and sealant tape from repair kits. Some sections leaked, so she wrapped them with fabric torn from seat cushions. It was messy and crude, but eventually she had a line running from the tanker all the way across the battlefield to where Thorn lay. When water finally started flowing through the hose, Lily actually cheered. She positioned the end near Thorn's mouth, and he drank for what felt like forever. Lily watched his throat work, swallowing gallon after gallon. His body seemed to swell slightly as he hydrated. When he finally stopped, that golden eye looked at her with clear gratitude. But the biggest problem showed up on the second night. Lily woke from a brief nap to find Thorn shivering. Actually shivering. This creature was the size of a building, covered in armored scales, with an internal body temperature that normally ran hotter than boiling water. And he was shaking like he was freezing. His scales had lost their shimmer. They looked dull and gray. His breathing had become shallow and rapid. When Lily touched his side, expecting to feel warmth, his scales felt cool. Not cold exactly, but nothing like the heat they should have had. His internal fire was going out. Lily's mind raced. How do you warm up something this big? She couldn't exactly wrap him in a blanket or make him hot soup. Then she remembered what Thorn had said about his fire needing fuel. Fire needed heat to stay alive. If his internal fire was fading, maybe external fire could help. Lily started gathering anything that would burn. Fuel cells from crashed ships, their safety containers already broken. Pieces of interior materials, fabrics and plastics and foams. Broken equipment with combustible parts. She even found some actual emergency flares in a survival kit. She arranged everything in a circle around Thorn's body and used a plasma lighter from a tool kit to start the fires. It felt ridiculous, like trying to heat an ocean with candles. But as the first flames started crackling and growing, Thorn's eye opened. She saw something flicker in that golden gaze. Recognition. Oh. For 3 days straight, Lily barely stopped moving. She checked his wounds constantly, making sure the biofoam seals held and no infections started. She kept the water flowing from the tanker. She maintained the fires, constantly searching for more things to burn. She'd find fuel, drag it back, add it to the flames, then go searching for more. She slept maybe an hour at a time, always curled up against Thorn's side where his scales were warmest. Even dying, even wounded, he was still warmer than the cold nights on this planet. And she talked, constantly, about everything. She told him about Earth, even though she'd never actually been there herself. Her parents had left when she was just 2 years old, chasing the dream of a new colony world. But she'd seen pictures and videos in the ship's archives. She described blue oceans that stretched to the horizon. Green forests with trees taller than buildings. Cities with towers that touched the clouds. Mountains covered in white snow that she'd never felt. She told him about her parents too. Her dad, David, had been a botanist. His whole job was trying to make Earth plants grow on alien worlds, adjusting them to different soils and different suns. Her mom, Rachel, had been a teacher at the colony's education center. They'd both died 6 months ago in a transport accident during the colony setup. A loading crane had malfunctioned. Lily had been at the children's center when it happened. She'd never gotten to say goodbye. She told him about humanity's struggle in the galaxy. How they'd only figured out faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. How they were the newest, youngest species in the Galactic Council. How the other races, species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, looked at humans like primitive children. Weak, fragile, not worth taking seriously. But we're stubborn, Lily said, adding more fuel to one of the fires. That's what Mom always said. Humans are stubborn. We don't give up easy. Thorn listened to everything. His eye would track her as she moved around, tending different tasks. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her even when she thought he was resting. And slowly, impossibly, he started getting better. His scales began to shimmer again on the 3rd day. His breathing deepened and became steady. The wounds underneath the biofoam started closing. On the 4th day, he lifted his massive head fully off the ground for the first time since she'd found him. His voice entered her mind, stronger now, less pained. Why do you remain here, small one? You could have left days ago. You could have searched for rescue on your own. Your chances of survival would be better away from a dying dragon. Lily was working on cleaning an infection from one of his smaller wounds, using sanitizer from a medical kit. She didn't even look up from her work. Because you stayed, she said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You stayed and protected us when you could have flown away. You took those hits for my convoy. For people you didn't even know. For me. I'm just paying it back. The silence stretched so long that Lily finally stopped what she was doing and looked up. Thorn's massive eye was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Something between wonder and sadness. In 300 years of warfare, his voice whispered through her mind, soft and amazed, across 1,000 battles on 100 different worlds, fighting beside countless warriors of dozens of species, no one has ever stayed for me. Not once. Lily smiled and went back to cleaning his wound. Well, she said cheerfully, I guess you never had a human friend before. We're pretty good at the whole loyalty thing. It's kind of our specialty. Lily first heard them on the morning of the 8th day. She'd been checking the water line when a sound made her freeze. It was a clicking noise like insects but amplified 1,000 times. The sound echoed across the battlefield, bouncing off the wreckage. Click 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 click. Rhythmic and hunting. The Scarith had come back. She ran back to Thorn as fast as her legs could carry her, nearly tripping over debris. Thorn. Something's coming. The dragon's head rose immediately, his nostrils flaring. His eyes narrowed to slits. Scarith, he rumbled in her mind. Hunter-killer packs. They returned to battlefields to scavenge and eliminate survivors. Lily's heart sank. She'd hoped they had more time. Over the past week, Thorn had healed remarkably well. The worst wounds had closed completely. His scales had regained their shimmer. His internal fire burned strong again. She could feel the heat radiating from him even from several feet away. But his wing, the one that had been crushed in the crash, was still crippled. The bones had set wrong. The membrane was torn beyond what his healing could fix. He could stand now. He could walk. He could fight with his claws and teeth and breathe his plasma fire. But he couldn't fly. And a dragon that couldn't fly was a dragon that couldn't escape. How many? Lily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Thorn tilted his head, listening to sounds Lily couldn't hear. 15, perhaps 20. They're spreading out, searching methodically. They'll find us within the hour. Can you fight them? Some, yes. But not all. Not without flight. His golden eye fixed on her. You must run, small one. Head south toward those ridge lines. There are caves there. The Scarith won't search them all. You can hide until another rescue ship comes. Lily looked at the ridges in the distance. They were maybe 2 miles away. She could probably make it if she ran now before the Scarith got closer. She could hide in those caves like Thorn said. Wait it out. She looked back at Thorn. At this creature who'd thrown himself in front of plasma lances to save people he didn't know. Who'd crashed here and been left behind by his own kind. Who would have died alone if she hadn't stayed. Lily shook her head and reached down to pick up the plasma cutter she'd salvaged from a maintenance robot 3 days ago. It was meant for cutting through metal, not fighting, but she'd modified it. She'd increased the power output using parts from other tools. It could probably cut through Scarith armor if she got close enough. Probably. No, she said firmly. We run together or we don't run at all. Lily, you cannot. I'm not leaving you. She checked the plasma cutter's charge. 70%. Better than nothing. You didn't leave me or anyone else on those transports. I'm not leaving you now. I am a warrior. I was bred for battle. You are a child. I'm a human child, Lily corrected, and despite the fear coursing through her veins, she managed a small smile. And humans are really, really stubborn. You know that by now. Thorn stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. His eyes brightened. When his voice entered her mind again, it carried a new tone. Not resignation but determination. Very well, he said. Then we fight together. But we fight smart. Come, there is much to prepare and little time. The clicking sounds were getting closer now. Lily could see movement in the wreckage to the north. Dark shapes scuttling between broken ships. What do we do? She asked. Thorn's lips pulled back, revealing teeth as long as her forearm. It might have been a smile, though on a dragon it looked terrifying. You have kept me alive with your human cleverness. Now we use that same cleverness to keep us both alive. Tell me, small one, what have you learned about this battlefield in your time searching for supplies? Lily's mind raced. She'd been all over this debris field for days, searching for anything useful. She knew where the fuel storage tanks were. She knew which ships still had working power cells. She knew where weapons lockers had been breached. She knew the layout better than anyone. There are fuel lines, she said quickly. From the crashed tanker and from that destroyer over there. Some of them are still pressurized. Good. What else? Defense turrets. Automated ones from the perimeter ships. Most are destroyed, but I saw 3 that might still have power. I couldn't activate them because I didn't have the right access codes, but I do, Thorn finished. Dragons are given command access to all Council military systems. What else? Lily thought hard. Power cells. Lots of them. The big industrial ones that explode if they're overloaded. Excellent. And the terrain? We're in a crater. The blast from that dreadnought created it. High sides on 3 sides open to the south. If they surround us, then we ensure they cannot surround us. We funnel them. We channel their approach. Thorn's eye gleamed. We turn this graveyard into a trap. The clicking was much closer now. Lily could see them clearly. Scarith warriors were about 7 feet tall, walking on 4 legs with 2 arms that ended in blade-like claws. Their bodies were covered in black chitinous armor that looked like beetle shells. Their heads were insectoid with mandibles that could bite through steel. There were more than 20. Lily counted at least 30, and more were appearing from the wreckage every minute. No time for elaborate preparation, Thorn said. Quick now. Run to that fuel line, the one near the destroyer. Can you rupture it? Yes, but... Do it. Then get to cover behind that engine block. When I roar, activate your plasma cutter and ignite the fuel. Lily ran. Her legs pumped as fast as they could carry her. She heard the Scarith notice her, heard their clicking intensify. Some broke away from the main group, scuttling toward her with terrifying speed. She reached the fuel line and aimed her plasma cutter at the weakest joint. One quick burst and fuel began spraying out, creating a wide pool on the ground. The smell was overwhelming, toxic and chemical. A Scarith warrior was almost on her. She could see its mandibles opening, could see the blade arms raising to strike. Then Thorn moved. For something so massive he was impossibly fast. He lunged across the crater, his crippled wing dragging but his legs powerful. He crashed into the Scarith warrior like a freight train, sending it tumbling across the ground. His tail whipped around, smashing into two more that had followed. Now, his voice roared through her mind. Lily dove behind the engine block and activated the plasma cutter, aiming at the fuel pool. The entire battlefield exploded into flames. The fuel ignited in a massive fireball that shot 50 feet into the air. Scarith warriors screamed, a sound like metal tearing. Their armor began to crack and split from the intense heat. And then Thorn breathed. His plasma breath channeled along the river of fire, superheating it beyond what the fuel alone could manage. The temperature in the crater jumped so high that Lily felt her skin burning even behind cover. She could see Scarith warriors literally melting, their armor turning liquid. But there were too many. Even as the first wave fell, more poured in from the sides. They adapted quickly, raising energy shields, activating cooling systems on their armor. They pressed forward through the flames, weapons raised and tracking toward both Thorn and Lily. The turrets? Lily shouted. Can you activate them? Thorn's eyes flashed. Somewhere in the wreckage, ancient systems came to life. 3 automated defense turrets, damaged but still functional, swiveled and began firing. The weapons weren't aimed at the Scarith directly. Instead, they targeted the ground around them, the debris piles, the unstable wreckage. Explosions rippled across the battlefield, creating chaos and confusion. In that chaos, Thorn was absolutely devastating. 3 centuries of combat experience guided every movement. When a Scarith warrior came from the left, his tail was already there to meet it. When 3 attacked together, his claws carved through them in a single sweep. His jaws caught one in midair and the crunch was sickening. Lily did what she could. She used her plasma cutter to trigger more fuel leaks, creating walls of fire that channeled the Scarith into kill zones. She overloaded power cells and threw them like grenades. She was terrified beyond belief, her hands shaking, her breath coming in gasps. But she didn't run. She stayed and she fought. They fought as one, dragon and human, warrior and survivor, predator and engineer. It shouldn't have worked. By every tactical analysis in the galaxy, they should have been overwhelmed in minutes. But the Scarith had never faced something like this before. A dying dragon who'd found a reason to live. And a human child who refused to abandon her friend. When the last Scarith warrior fell, the silence was deafening. Lily collapsed against a piece of wreckage, her plasma cutter falling from her trembling hands. Her jumpsuit was scorched and torn. Her face was covered in soot. Every muscle in her body screamed. Thorn stood in the center of the crater, surrounded by the bodies of their enemies. Smoke rose from his scales. His wounded wing hung at his side. He was breathing hard but he was standing. They'd survived. That. Thorn's voice entered her mind, filled with something between exhaustion and wonder. That should not have been possible. Lily managed a weak laugh. Yeah, well, humans are good at impossible. The Scarith hunter-killer pack that arrived on the 8th day numbered exactly 15 warriors. Lily counted them as they emerged from the wreckage, her heart pounding. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were specialists and she could tell by their equipment. Each warrior carried weapons specifically designed to kill dragons. Plasma lances that could pierce scales. Cryogrenades meant to freeze a dragon's internal fire. Neural disruptors that could scramble even a dragon's formidable mind. They'd come prepared, probably tracking Thorn's heat signature for days, waiting until they had the perfect strike team assembled. What they hadn't prepared for was Lily. Over the past 3 days, while tending to Thorn's wounds and keeping him alive, Lily had also been doing something else. She'd been preparing the battlefield. Not consciously at first, just moving things around, organizing supplies. But after Thorn had started healing, after they'd begun talking strategy, her preparations had become deliberate. She'd mapped out every fuel line in the area. The crashed tanker she'd used for water had 3 separate fuel systems, and she'd carefully traced where each line ran. Some went underground, pipes that had survived the crash. Others ran along the surface, protected by armored conduits. She'd found the weak points, the places where a single blast from her plasma cutter could rupture them. She'd positioned debris carefully. What looked like random piles of wreckage were actually strategic placements. A broken engine block here could provide cover. A section of hull plating there could funnel enemies into a narrow corridor. She'd turned the entire crater into a maze that only she fully understood. The automated turrets had been her best find. 3 defense platforms from the perimeter ships, damaged but not destroyed. Their targeting systems were scrambled, but their power cores still held a charge. She couldn't activate them herself, didn't have the command codes. But Thorn did. Dragons were given override access to all Council military systems, part of their role as elite warriors. And then there were the power cells. Industrial-grade energy storage units, the kind used to jumpstart ship engines or power emergency systems. Normally they were safe, protected by multiple failsafes. But if you bypassed those failsafes, if you deliberately overloaded them, they became bombs. Lily had spent an entire afternoon very carefully preparing 12 of them, hiding them in strategic locations around the crater. Her mom had been a teacher, but her dad had been an engineer before he became a botanist. He taught Lily how systems worked, how to improvise and adapt. Everything is just a tool, he used to say. It's all about using the right tool at the right time. Lily had turned this graveyard into a toolbox, and now it was time to use those tools. The Scarith advanced in a standard hunter formation, spreading out to surround their target. They were disciplined and professional, keeping their spacing perfect so that Thorn couldn't catch multiple targets with a single attack. Their weapons were charged and ready. They reached the edge of the crater and began their descent, mandibles clicking in anticipation. Now, Thorn whispered in her mind. Lily triggered the first fuel line. The rupture happened directly beneath 3 Scarith warriors. Fuel sprayed upward in a pressurized fountain, coating them completely. They recognized the danger immediately and began backpedaling, but Lily was already moving to the next trigger point. The second fuel line ran along the northern ridge. When she cut it, fuel began pouring down the crater wall like a waterfall. The Scarith tried to avoid it, but that put them exactly where Lily wanted them, in the kill zone she and Thorn had planned. "Light them up," she shouted. Thorn didn't need to be told twice. He breathed and the world turned into fire. Dragon plasma breath wasn't like regular fire. It was superheated matter, hot enough to turn sand into glass instantly, hot enough to cut through starship hulls. When Thorn's breath hit the fuel, the entire crater became an inferno. The Scarith warriors screamed. That sound would haunt Lily's dreams for years, like metal tearing combined with something organic and alive. Their black armor began to crack. The specialized cooling systems built into their suits kicked in, working desperately to protect them. But the fire was just the opening move. While the Scarith were focused on the flames, while their sensors were overwhelmed by heat and light, Thorn moved. His crippled wing might have kept him from flying, but it was still a massive sheet of armored membrane and bone. He used it like a shield, sweeping it in front of him as he charged forward. A Scarith warrior managed to fire a plasma lance. The shot hit Thorn's wing dead center. Under normal circumstances, it would have burned straight through. But the wing was already damaged, already deadened. The shot scorched it but didn't penetrate to his body. Thorn slammed into the Scarith formation like a battering ram. His weight alone, probably close to 50 tons, was devastating. Warriors went flying. One got caught under his foot and didn't get back up. His claws, each one as long as Lily was tall and sharper than any blade, swept through the Scarith ranks. Their armor was tough, designed to withstand small arms fire and even light explosives. But dragon claws had been carving through starship hulls for centuries. The armor might as well have been paper. But there were still too many and they were adapting fast. That was the Scarith's greatest strength, rapid adaptation. Their shields came up, energy barriers that could deflect even plasma fire. Their weapons refocused on Thorn's vulnerable spots, his eyes, his throat, the joints between his scales. That's when Lily made her move. Any sane person would have run away from the battle, would have hidden behind cover and hoped to survive. But Lily had learned something important over the past 8 days. Sometimes the most dangerous place was actually the safest because it was the last place your enemies expected you to be. She ran straight into the chaos. Her small size was an advantage. She was barely 4 feet tall, easily missed in the confusion of battle, especially with Thorn taking up so much attention. She dodged between debris, her plasma cutter in hand, heading for her hidden surprises. The first power cell was positioned near a cluster of 3 Scarith warriors who'd regrouped and were preparing to fire in coordinated volleys. Lily triggered the overload sequence she'd programmed and dove for cover. The explosion wasn't huge, power cells weren't designed to be massive bombs, but it was enough. The blast sent all 3 warriors tumbling, their shields flickering and failing from the energy surge. Thorn was on them instantly, moving with a speed that seemed impossible for something so large. Lily kept moving. She reached the hidden turret control nodes she'd set up, small devices salvaged from ship computers. She activated them remotely, and suddenly 3 automated defense platforms came to life. The turrets didn't fire at the Scarith directly. That would have been too easy to counter. Instead, following the programming Thorn had helped her create, they fired at the environment. At unstable debris piles. At weakened ship sections. At fuel containers and power junctions. Explosions rippled across the battlefield in a carefully orchestrated chain. The Scarith formation broke apart, forced to dodge falling debris and secondary explosions. Their careful tactics dissolved into chaos and confusion. And in chaos, Thorn thrived. 300 years of combat experience guided every movement. He knew exactly when to strike and when to defend. When to use his claws and when to use his tail. When to breathe fire and when to save his energy. He fought with the efficiency of a master, wasting no motion, making every attack count. Lily kept triggering her traps. Another power cell here. Another fuel line there. She directed the turret fire to cut off escape routes and create barriers. She was terrified, her hands shook, her breath came in gasps, her heart felt like it would explode, but she didn't stop. She'd promised she wouldn't leave him. That meant she had to fight. A Scarith warrior spotted her. Its insectoid head turned, mandibles spreading. It changed direction, coming straight for her with terrifying speed. Its blade arms raised, ready to cut her in half. Lily didn't run. She triggered the fuel line directly between them. Fire erupted upward in a wall. The Scarith couldn't stop its momentum, couldn't turn fast enough. It ran straight into the flames. Lily heard it scream and forced herself not to feel sick. This was survival. This was protecting her friend. She didn't have the luxury of hesitation. The battle felt like it lasted hours, but realistically it was probably only 10 minutes. 10 minutes of absolute chaos, of fire and explosions and the sounds of combat that Lily would never forget. When the last Scarith warrior fell, taken down by a combination of Thorn's claws and a well-placed turret shot, the silence was almost painful. Lily's legs gave out. She collapsed against Thorn's massive foreleg, her plasma cutter slipping from her trembling fingers. Her entire body shook from adrenaline and exhaustion. Her jumpsuit was scorched in a dozen places. Her face was covered in soot and ash. She could taste smoke and chemicals. Around them the crater looked like a war zone, which she supposed it was. Fire still burned in patches. Debris was scattered everywhere. The bodies of 15 Scarith warriors lay among the wreckage. They'd won. Somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Thorn lowered his head beside her, his golden eyes studying her with an expression of pure wonder. That should not have been possible. A wounded dragon and a human child against 15 trained hunter-killers with specialized equipment. Every tactical simulation would predict our defeat. Lily managed a weak laugh that came out more like a wheeze. She looked up at him and grinned despite everything, despite the terror and the exhaustion and the fact that she'd just been in a real battle at age 8. Well, she said, her voice hoarse from smoke, humans are pretty good at surviving impossible things. It's kind of our specialty. We're stubborn like that. Thorn's eye crinkled slightly. If dragons could smile, Lily thought that's what he was doing. Indeed, his voice rumbled through her mind, warm with affection and respect. I am beginning to understand this about your species. You do not know when you are supposed to lose. Nope, Lily agreed, letting her head rest against his scales. They were warm, almost hot, and she realized she was shivering. We really don't. They stayed like that for a long moment, dragon and human, warrior and child, survivors together in the aftermath of battle. The fires burned low. The smoke began to clear. And somewhere in the distance, Lily heard a sound that made her heart leap with hope. The distinctive whine of ship engines. Rescue was finally coming. The rescue ship arrived on the 21st day. Lily had started marking time by scratching lines into a piece of hull plating, the way prisoners did in old movies. 21 lines meant 3 weeks since the battle had ended. 3 weeks since everyone had left them behind. She heard the engines first, that distinctive whine of atmospheric thrusters. Lily jumped up from where she'd been sitting, nearly dropping the ration bar she'd been eating. Real food, not the emergency kind. Thorn had taught her how to hunt the small creatures that lived in the wreckage. Turns out dragon senses were really good at finding things. Thorn. Someone's coming, she shouted, even though he could probably hear the ship better than she could. The dragon lifted his head from where he'd been resting in the sun. Over the past 2 weeks he'd continued healing remarkably well. His scales gleamed like polished metal. His wounds were completely closed, leaving only faint scars. Even his wing, while still not capable of true flight, had regained some mobility. He could glide short distances now, which he'd demonstrated by catching dinner yesterday. The ship came into view, a council patrol vessel with the standard white and blue markings. It circled the crater twice, probably scanning for threats before beginning its descent. Landing gear deployed with a hydraulic hiss, and the ship settled onto a flat section of debris about 100 yards from where Lily and Thorn waited. A ramp extended. Armed security personnel came out first, weapons ready, scanning the area. Then came a tall woman in a captain's uniform, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in space. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. The makeshift camp, the evidence of recent battles, the massive dragon, and the small human child standing beside it. Lily waved cheerfully and walked forward to meet them. "About time someone showed up," she called out. "We've been holding this position for almost a month. I was starting to think you guys forgot about us entirely." The captain blinked several times, like she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. You're alive." The manifest showed one missing child, Lily Bennett, age 8. "You were presumed dead when the convoy couldn't locate you after the drone strike." "Yeah, well, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Lily said, repeating a line she'd read in one of her dad's old books. "I got separated, but I wasn't alone. Thorn kept me safe." As if on cue, Thorn rose to his full height and walked over to stand beside Lily. Each of his footsteps made the ground tremble slightly. He was magnificent and terrifying, 50 meters of muscle and scales and barely contained power. The afternoon sun caught his crimson and gold coloring, making him look like he was made of fire and precious metal. The security team immediately raised their weapons, neural disruptors and plasma rifles, all tracking the dragon. Fingers moved to triggers. Lily heard the whine of weapons charging. Thorn's response was immediate and unmistakable. A low, rumbling growl that started deep in his chest and resonated through the air like distant thunder. It was a sound that said clearly, "Touch her and die." His eyes, those golden eyes that Lily had come to know so well, fixed on the security team with predatory focus. "Stand down," Captain Miller shouted, her voice sharp with command. "Lower your weapons now. That's Thornax the Ember Dawn. He's listed as killed in action, but..." She looked between the dragon and the child, her expression shifting from shock to confusion to something like awe. What happened here? What happened, Captain Miller learned over the next several hours, was impossible. They sat in the shade of Thorn's wing while Lily told the story. She explained how she'd found him dying, how she'd spent days keeping him alive with nothing but determination and salvaged supplies. She showed them her makeshift water pump system, the biofoam medical supplies she'd applied, the fires she'd maintained. She explained their bond, how they'd become friends, how they'd learned to trust each other. Then she took them to the battlefield where they'd fought the Scarth hunter-killer pack. The evidence was still there, blast marks, bodies, the clever trap system she'd engineered. Captain Miller's tactical officer examined the scene and looked increasingly disturbed. 15 trained Scarth warriors with anti-dragon weapons, he muttered, studying his scanner readings. Against a wounded dragon and an 8-year-old child. This shouldn't have been survivable. But we did survive, Lily said simply. Because we worked together. Because neither of us gave up. The story spread like wildfire through the council fleets. Captain Miller filed her report, including detailed scans and video documentation. Within days, every ship in the sector had heard about the human child who'd saved a dying dragon. Within a week, the story had reached the inner worlds. Within a month, it had spread across the entire galactic community. And with that story, something fundamental shifted in how humanity was perceived. Before, humans had been the junior members of galactic society. They joined the council only 40 years ago, after stumbling into faster-than-light travel almost by accident. The other species, civilizations thousands of years old, had viewed them as primitive newcomers. Weak, emotional, too soft for the harsh realities of interstellar politics and warfare. Humans were tolerated but rarely respected. They were given the worst trade routes, the least desirable colony worlds, the missions no one else wanted. In council chambers, human representatives were often ignored or talked over. It was assumed humanity would eventually learn their place or fade away. But Lily's story changed that conversation. Because the galaxy suddenly understood something about humans they'd overlooked. Humanity's compassion wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon. A weapon unlike any other species possessed. Humans could turn enemies into allies. They could inspire loyalty so fierce that legendary warriors would choose death over abandoning them. They could look at impossible situations and find solutions no one else imagined. They refused to accept defeat, refused to leave anyone behind, refused to give up even when any logical analysis said they should. That was terrifying to species that viewed everything through cold tactical calculations. Thornax the Emberdawn did something no dragon in recorded history had ever done. He formally requested reassignment from the Draconis military to human forces. He declared Lily his bonded companion, a sacred title among dragonkind reserved for warriors of legendary achievement. The Draconis High Council was stunned. Dragons didn't bond with other species. Dragons didn't request transfers. Dragons certainly didn't declare 8-year-old human children as their battle companions. But Thorn was adamant. "I have fought for 3 centuries, he told the High Council through long-distance communication. "I have served the Galactic Council with honor. I have earned the right to choose my own path. And I choose to stay with the human who stayed with me." They couldn't refuse him. Thorn had earned too much honor, fought too many battles. So humanity gained its first dragon warrior, and suddenly human forces were taken much more seriously. Other species began to reconsider their assessment of humanity. If dragons respected them, if legendary warriors chose to serve with them, perhaps humans were more than they appeared. Lily, for her part, was adopted by a human military family since her parents were gone. But Thorn remained her constant guardian and friend. As she grew up, he taught her things no human had ever learned: dragon combat philosophy, strategic thinking from centuries of warfare, even some of the dragon language. She joined the military academy at 16, youngest admission in history. She specialized in cross-species cooperation and unconventional tactics. By 25, she'd made captain. By 32, she was admiral, the youngest in human history. And through it all, Thorn was there. Her guardian, her mentor, her friend. When Admiral Lily Bennett addressed the Galactic Council for the first time at age 34, Thornax stood behind her in the chamber. Some species found it intimidating. That was fine with Lily. Sometimes intimidation was useful. She stood at the podium, wearing her admiral's uniform with its rows of medals, and looked out at the representatives of dozens of species. Some had been dismissive of humanity for decades. Some still were. "Many of you have heard my story," she began, her voice clear and confident. "How I was left behind on Velker Plains. How I found a dying dragon. How we survived together." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What you may not understand is what that story means. You see, the Galactic Council left Thornax to die. You left me to die. That was the logical choice, the tactical choice. Evacuation protocols don't include searching for every lost individual. Resources are finite. The mission takes priority." Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. "But humans don't think that way." "We stayed." A human child looked at a dying dragon, a creature from a species known for abandoning their wounded, and said, "I'm not leaving you." That's not naivety. That's not stupidity. That's the core of what makes humanity who we are. Lily's voice grew stronger. "Humanity will always stay. We will dig through the impossible to find solutions. We will stand beside our allies even when retreat is the smart choice. We look at odds that should crush us and ask, but what if we tried anyway? We turn compassion into strategy and loyalty into strength." Thorn shifted behind her, his presence reinforcing every word. "That's what you need to understand about my species. We're not the weakest members of this council. We're potentially the most dangerous. Because nothing in this universe is more unstoppable than a human who's decided you're worth saving." She let that hang in the air for a moment. "And nothing is more terrifying than a human who's decided you're not." The council chamber was completely silent. From that day forward, humanity's voice in galactic politics carried new weight. They were no longer dismissed or ignored. Because every species in the council had learned a fundamental truth: underestimate humans at your own risk. They looked weak, but they'd survived Earth's harsh history. They seemed emotional, but they turned that emotion into an advantage. They appeared soft, but they possessed a hardness forged in refusing to abandon their own. Humanity had arrived. And the galaxy would never be quite the same again. Years later, Lily would stand on the observation deck of humanity's first fleet carrier, watching stars streak past, with Thorn curled beside her. Still her friend, still her guardian after all these years. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him. "Leaving your people to stay with mine?" Thorn's golden eye opened, reflecting the starlight. "I have no regrets. You taught me something my people had forgotten across millennia of warfare. You taught me that strength comes in many forms, and the strongest bonds are those forged not in victory, but in refusing to accept defeat together." Lily smiled and rested her hand on his scales, still warm after all these years. "We're stubborn like that," she said softly. "Yes," Thorn agreed, his mental voice warm with affection. "You really are." And somewhere out in the galaxy, on countless worlds and stations and ships, the story continued to spread. The story of a human girl and a dragon, and how they'd changed everything by simply refusing to give up on each other. Because that, more than any weapon or technology, was humanity's true gift to the stars.